I've paid thousands of dollars in courses to learn what you're basically teaching on your podcast for free. What you're putting out there is so valuable. So, I just really want to acknowledge you, and I definitely send everyone to your podcast.
You were virtually one of the first mentors that I looked up to and started following. You're always one step ahead of the game. So I just wanted to give you kudos and props for that, because lots of people are watching, lots of people are learning from it.
Tucker and the whole TTM crew, Dan and Chris, thanks so much for your support. I love what you guys do, and a huge, huge fan. Having this support's huge. So I'm grateful for that.
What's up, everybody out there in listener land? This is episode 254 of the Real Dealz podcast, and I'm coming this week live from Maui. Well, actually, by the time you guys hear this, I won't be in Maui anymore. I'll be back in what will probably be cold and snowy Portland. But for the time being, I'm actually sitting on my balcony here, looking out at the ocean, and I can see whales popping up. I can see Lanai in the background, and I figured, hey, what a way to record a show. So I wanted to knock out a show while I'm here this week. I've got a few minutes of reprieve from my little monsters that are down at the pool, hopefully wearing themselves out. Learned a couple valuable life lessons on this trip for any of you guys out there in listener land that have little kids. Sometimes, it's a little too early for full family vacations, or maybe not a little too early, but there's no such thing as vacation when you've got 2 kids under 3, that's for sure. It's a constant, no question. So anyway, I got a few minutes away, and I'm going to enjoy this view, and I'm going to record this show for you guys. So this week's show, since I was out last week, we've had a lot of stuff going on with our Driving for Dollars app, and there's been some questions that I've seen online, and I thought, you know what, let's record a show that goes through some of the specifics in terms of actual list building strategies. Now, we did a show a couple shows back that was all about how to actually market to lists once you create them, but I wanted to do a show that kind of breaks down how to create those lists, because there's a method to the madness, and there's a way that we do it on a continual basis that makes it very organized. So not only are you organized on the back end when you do the marketing, which was what the previous show was all about, but you should also be very organized in how you create those lists. You don't want to just be randomly putting down houses here and there. I mean, you can do that and you can market to them, but you can't run a sustained, and we'll call it a business that gives you some sort of consistency in your lead flow, right? If you're just randomly doing a house here and there, you can market to them and you can eventually get those people to raise their hand and say, hey, I might be interested in selling, but you want to have some method to how it is that you're building a list. So this week's show, I'm going to get into exactly how it is that we build our lists, so that you can use some of those tips and tricks when you guys go out to build your list. So that's this week's show. I think you are going to definitely be able to use that information and dig it. Now, before we get into all that, a couple things I want to mention. First, our housekeeping items. Number one is our Deal Finders Academy. For those of you guys that don't know, or you've been living under a rock for the last 4.5 years, we have our Deal Finders Academy, or as we often refer to it, the DFA, which is basically our online mastermind group. It's incredibly affordable. We have kept the price at $199 a month, which is basically $2,400 a year, to be a part of one of the best groups of investors from all over the country. And it's essentially an online virtual group that you can rub virtual elbows, ask questions on a daily basis, and get on-demand information back from other members, myself, and everybody that's a part of the community. And there's just a lot of great people in there as well. A lot of high-level information, not only on how to run your business, but also, how to market and how to do all kinds of things that, the little stuff on top of the big stuff that really gives you competitive advantage. And like I said, more than anything, it's a great group of people that are from all different walks of real estate investing. So you can get information on all different types of niches within this crazy business that we're in called real estate investing. So reach out to us. We'd love to add you to our community and make you a part of it. You can just, we'll have a link in the show notes, but you can also go to thedealfindersacademy.com and set up a call with Dan. We don't like to stack people on top of each other the best that we can. We like like to keep it proprietary and keep people separated, so that way people aren't marketing right on top of each other with the same type of proprietary information, and that way it keeps the competition at a minimum, and we take care of our members because that's our biggest thing that we want to do. So reach out to us, we'd love to join you. Second thing I want to mention is our Driving for Dollars app. We released some updates this past week, which went out relatively flawlessly. Anytime you do a big update, which this was because we had a ton of new data points that basically were getting pulled for every user, for every property all across the country through an API, which it can cause bugs and challenges and issues. It's just like rehabbing a house, you know, I mean, inevitably something is going to go wrong. So we had a few bugs here and there, but overall it was a very successful launch of the new version. So if you have not already, make sure you go download it. And if you are getting any issues whatsoever, just trust that and know that behind the scenes we're working on them to get them all worked out. And Dan runs our help desk at our Driving for Dollars app Facebook page, where you can also email info@drivingfordollars.app.com. So anyway, make sure that you go download it. It's free to download. You get a 5-property free trial. Can't speak here today. And you can give it a try. But it's a fantastic tool, and really it's just, we're going to talk about how to build lists within it today, but you can listen to the previous show on how to use all the information that it gives you to then market as well. Now, keep in mind, if you do have any issues, there are people on the other side of the help desk, namely Dan, right? So be nice to them, folks. There's some of you guys out there that are using the app that are not so nice online. I would imagine you're probably a lot nicer in person. So let's work on our online tact, shall we? Because all we want to do is fix any issues that arise. Not that there's that many, but people want, we're in an on-demand world. So if things don't function exactly properly on demand, they get a little pissy pants, right? So let's take a step back. Let's be nice. Just let us know, and you can then know that we'll be behind the scenes working on fixing anything that comes up. So other than that, the rollout went flawlessly, and there's tons and tons of people from all across the country using it to get awesome information on people, so they can basically say, hey, I'm interested in selling and you're interested in buying. So go download it. It's free to download. You get a 5-property free trial, and then it's only $34.99 a month, and the data is unlimited. Now, what's going on with me and TTM over the course of the past week? Well, number one, I'm sitting on my balcony here in Maui. But number two is we actually went pending on this past Friday while I was sitting here in Maui. We went pending on a property that I actually signed DocuSigned the paperwork right as I got off the airplane, landing in Maui, which was pretty cool. For any of you guys that follow me on Facebook, it's kind of a more contemporary ranch that we did that we listed in Southwest Portland. We ended up going pending just over 2 weeks on the market, and we did really well on that in terms of getting close to list price. It's a fantastic home, and the people that are getting it are going to be really, really excited, that's for sure. So always nice to land in Maui, and then of course DocuSign a purchase and sale contract. Other than that, we've got a new project in Lake Oswego that we're working on. I've been posting some pictures on that as well on my Facebook page if we're friends on Facebook. But one of the things about that project is, number one, it's going to be probably our biggest transformation to date, which is awesome. But number two is that it's the neighbors actually are appreciative of the fact that we're renovating the house, which is a little bit abnormal here for the Portland area. Most of the time people don't like what we do. They don't like development companies. They don't like people coming in and making noise, doing construction, whatever it might be. But in this particular case, we've gotten, I can't even tell you how many thank yous, how many people that have come by and said, you know what, it's awesome what you guys are doing. We've even had people call the office and say thanks for fixing up that house, which in a normal world is what you would expect. In the world of Portlandia, doesn't always happen. But in this particular case, we found a pocket that actually has a lot of nice people that are happy that we're renovating the house and improving the neighborhood. Imagine that, right? So anyway, we've got that going on. We've also got our multi-million-dollar new build that we're finally moving forward. Again, if you're friends with me on Facebook, you probably saw my Facebook post. We got stalled out for 3 weeks over a simple site plan review to basically make sure that we had proper tree protection fencing around the trees for this particular property and lot that we had, where we have to protect trees that are, around the construction area. So it took 3+ weeks, but somebody down in the city of Portland finally looked at it and said, yep, looks good. And so now we're able to move and groove again and get that thing going. We're shooting an episode this week. You guys will see as well that we're going to drop $1 million builds that'll show you guys our progress on some of the retaining wall stuff that we're building in the back. So make sure that you check that out. But other than that, I want to get into the main topic of this week's show, which is all about Driving for Dollars app list building. So without further ado, let's get into it. All right, Real Dealz podcast listeners, I want to talk quickly about our show's sponsor, Ironbridge Lending. If you guys have not reached out to Ironbridge already to talk to them about funding some of your upcoming flip projects, I highly encourage you to do so. I've known the owner of Ironbridge for a very long time. I've personally borrowed millions of dollars from them over the years to do a number of different projects, and I can say without a doubt, they are the best hard money lending company I have ever come across, and that is the reason why they are the sole sponsor of this show. I've had a lot of other companies reach out to me and want to sponsor this show, but I just won't do it. I feel like I need to be genuine in who we have sponsoring the show, and it needs to be somebody that I've personally done a ton of business with. So I personally vouch for their ability to be the best, hands down, in the world of hard money lending. You won't find better programs, you won't find better terms, and they're lending or will be lending in over 20 states. So chances are, if you're hearing this in whatever state you're in, it's definitely worth it to check out their website, reach out to them, see if they're lending in your state, and if they are, I would absolutely encourage you to do business with them. Another very cool thing to note is that they have a program for most rehabs where you can actually borrow up to 90% of the purchase price. Now, this is given the fact that you are actually buying a deal, which if you're listening to the show, that means you probably are. But if you have an actual deal on the table, they'll fund up to 90% of your purchase price, and they'll even give you rehab funds on top of that, which means that it only takes 10% down to get into a project, which is unbelievable in the hard money world. So do yourself a favor, reach out to Ironbridge Lending, have a conversation with them, see if they're a good fit for you and for your next project. I can guarantee you that you'll be happy that you did. All right, guys, let's get into the main topic for this week's show, and that is going to be all about how to properly build your driving for dollars list. Now, we talked about how to market to them in a previous show, which is super important. But building those lists is also very important. And I want to share with you a few tips and tricks and things that we do internally that really helps clarify the types of leads that we're going after, where we're marketing to, and where we're building these lists and how we're doing it in a methodical manner, we'll say, or in a way that it keeps it just very organized, right? Because it can be a disorganized process for a lot of people where they're just kind of randomly doing it here and there, and there's really no organization to it, which is why driving for dollars really never takes off for them. It's why it's a strategy where they just then defer to, large list polls and then market to that. Where really, these are the best leads that you can possibly have for your business. You just have to learn how to generate these lists or create these lists in a very methodical and organized manner. So that's what we're going to go through today. So the first thing that I want to bring up is areas, right? A lot of times, people are just randomly like, oh, that would be a good house, or that would be a good house, which is true, and there's no reason why you shouldn't pin that house in the Driving for Dollars app. But you really need to sit down and think about, okay, where do I want my farm areas to be? Because once you do that, now you can really start to map out, okay, where do I want to spend my time building these lists? And then you can use the app for what it's intended for, which is to create these larger lists for you to market to. So if you plan out the areas that you want to market to, I call them farm areas. Now you're not haphazardly just kind of cruising around town and saying, oh, there's one, oh, there's one, oh, there's one, and then pulling out your phone and adding it to your list. Now you can do that as well, and I'm not saying you shouldn't. But if you're going to utilize driving for dollars on a mass scale, if you're going to build lists that actually produce consistent and ongoing lead flow, it's going to have to be fairly sizable. You can't just rely on a onesie-twosie type situation because it's just not enough potential leads in order to generate enough deals for you to have a viable business. Some of our competition sets up their app that way, and that's why I think it's severely flawed, because in this world of people being marketed a lot, you need a large universe of people that own property that you market to in order to put together deals on a consistent basis. So number one is you need to determine what areas you want to market to, right? You need to pick a farm area. It's a very, very important thing, but it's also a very simple concept. So figure out where it is that you want to be. And if you are a rehabber, then where do you want to rehab, right? What's convenient to your life? Where do you want to be price point wise? What types of pockets do you want to be in? What types of neighborhoods? What parts of town? Do you want to fight traffic? Do you want to not fight traffic? Do you care? All these things are things that you need to think about. The second thing you need to think about, though, is once you decide on the areas, what types of leads are you looking for, right? Because areas can differ a lot in terms of, the types of projects that you're able to pull out of those areas, right? Are you in an area where knockdown new builds are happening, right? Where new construction can happen, or whether there's underlying multifamily or higher density zoning within single family homes that basically sit on dirt that's zoned for higher density stuff? Are you in an area like that? Or are you in an area where the price points aren't high enough for new construction to happen, and so you're simply looking at remodel or rehab type leads? You really need to figure that out. And some areas have kind of a mix of all three of those, but you need to know what your farm areas are in order for you to know the answers to those questions that I just brought up, for you to then be able to determine what leads are good leads and which leads are great leads, right? Because that's an important thing. So for us personally, we have different types of areas that we do our lists in. We have our predominantly redevelopment type areas where we're looking at them from a knockdown new build type situation, where it's a bigger lot, smaller house, or it's a bigger lot and a rundown house that maybe that lot could be split, or maybe it's not a bigger lot, it's a normal sized lot, but it's a small house or a really rundown house in an area where you're getting $1 million, $1.5 million, whatever it may be for new construction, or even 800, 700,000. And sometimes even 600,000. That's about threshold for Portland in terms of new construction pricing in town, anyway, we'll call it. When you're doing one down, one up type situations where you're just tearing one house down and building one in its place. But knowing the types of leads that you're looking for is super important, and you can determine that by the areas that you're marketing to. And those areas, then you need to know the price points in those areas, what types of sales are occurring, have people set high watermarks with new construction pricing so that it's possible, or are you looking purely for just rehab type deals? So when you start to understand that stuff, then you know the types of leads that you should be going after in certain areas. So a lot of markets are not they don't have high enough price points to be able to absorb one-off new construction, so you're really just looking for rehab type projects, right? But other markets are much more dynamic in terms of pricing, so that means that you could look at something from multiple different lenses. It's not just from a rehab perspective. It could be from a redevelopment perspective. It could be from a knockdown new build perspective. There are those things to keep in mind. So those are big things. Now, here's another big tip that I'm going to give you. When you start building these lists, determine an area, right? Like we just talked about. Once you determine an area, figure out the details of that area in terms of the economics and the price points and the zoning, like we just mentioned. Do that area, drive it, make sure that you pull all the leads out of it that match based on what we just talked about. Then, as you move forward with increasing the universe size of people or leads for your Driving for Dollars lists, what you want to do is basically go adjacent to that area, grow another list, and then adjacent to that area, grow another list, or as close as you can, so that basically you're starting with one small pocket, and then you're adding pockets onto that and onto that and onto that, and before you know it, you have a much bigger part of town that you want to be in. And so that's how we do it. That's how we are able to do it in a methodical, very organized fashion. We have an area called the landing strip that we market, and then we have other parts of town that we market to as well, that we start that way. We have one little pocket, and then we build off of that pocket. And maybe the new lists don't exactly touch that other pocket. Maybe they do, but we use that first list and that first area as kind of ground zero, and then we build off of that. And so that way you don't feel like you have to get the whole town in one clean swoop, but it also makes sense to you in terms of, how you're building your list and when you're adding to it and what types of leads you're adding to it. So if you have, like, let's say, for example, for us, we do a lot of marketing in Lake Oswego. We've broken Lake Oswego up into like 8 different lists because there's like 8 different parts of Lake Oswego, but they all kind of butt up next to each other. So we didn't just drive all of Lake Oswego. We started with one pocket, and then we did another and another and another. And within those pockets, there's different types of leads and there's different price points. And that's the same across the country for all you guys that are listening. And so that's how we do it in a very organized fashion. Because now you know when you get a call in, you know which list it's from, right? Which usually means you know what type of lead it is, whether it's potentially a redevelopment lead or whether it's just a straight renovation lead, or maybe it's a teardown lead, or maybe it's a multifamily lead, or whatever it is, right? Because you know the type of list that it is based on the lead that's coming in, based on the areas that you've chosen. And one of the other things that we do is when we send the mail out, we actually mark the back of the envelopes to tell whenever that lead comes in, if it comes in via return mail, what list that it came from. But then also we have those lists broken down in Excel files, so when the lead comes in and Chris is getting the call, he can pull up the address, and that address then references the little insignia that we put on the back of the envelopes for the return mail. So we know which lead or list it's from right away, which means we know what type of lead that it most likely is right away. And so when we go to these different areas, Chris is generally looking for slightly different lead types. But we start with one area, We know the lead types in that area. Then we build out an adjacent list in a pocket or area right next to that with that same type of mentality and that same type of information. So if you do that on a consistent basis, because I've seen a lot of you guys out there saying, I'm going to drive an hour a week or 2 hours a week or whatever and build my Driving for Dollars list, that's the best way to do it, or have people within your organization do it, so that you do it methodically, you do it in a very organized fashion, you do it in a way that doesn't leave gaps or holes. You're covering an entire geographic area that you want to be in, of course, but you're doing it in a very organized fashion. So that way, when you do run your marketing campaigns to these Driving for Dollars leads, it's not like they're just kind of scatterbrained, bipolar all over the place, right? It's very much like you would pull filtered lists out of list source, same type of thing. So that's how we do it. Those are some big tips on how you guys can then take that information and create your list the same way. I would highly suggest that you do it. It really clarifies the Driving for Dollars process, and that's a big thing. And that's a big reason why I think a lot of people have trouble with Driving for Dollars, is that they just don't have an organized plan on, number one, how they're going to build the list, but then number two, how to market to them. So if you go back to listen to the previous show, it gives you all the information on how to market to them. And if you download the app, we actually have a 7-email series that kind of goes through exactly how to market to them as well. But this is more about how to build the lists in an organized manner, because it starts with building the list. Then you can market to them, but you got to build the lists in an organized fashion in order to then have these lists that have enough people on them to market to get consistent lead flow and deal flow for your business. So hopefully that gives you guys some good information. Hopefully you can put it to work in your business. And like I said, we've been doing this for years within my own business, and that's exactly how we built lists, and we build out entire areas. And you know, we've got a universe that's rapidly closing in on 30,000 Driving for Dollars leads all over town, and we use that universe to consistently pull lead flow each and every week into our business. So use that information and go out there and start building some lists. All right, guys, that was episode 254 from my balcony here in Maui. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. I'll be back in Portland this week. As you guys are listening to this, thinking about how lovely the sunshine is here and how cold it probably is there. But make sure that you guys use that information that I gave you in this week's show. Definitely good stuff, and I want to see you guys use our Driving for Dollars app to its utmost capabilities. And if you build your list like we talked about in this episode, and then you market to them like we did in previous episodes, you'll definitely be able to do that. So, out of here for this week, and as they say in Hawaii, mahalo, and I'll see you all next week.